All right, so welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going to be tackling the reactions around Trump's cabinet picks. And we've got, let's see, we've got a Reddit thread from China Politics.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know,
Always a good source.
always good for some fiery opinions,
Yeah.
right? We've got those. And then also an MSNBC piece by Jahan Jones.
Okay.
So kind of a mix of sources, but really interesting to see what people are saying.
Yeah.
So our mission is to figure out why these cabinet picks are making so many waves, both for and against them. What are the implications?
Absolutely. And you know, what I found striking in preparing for this deep dive was that even Russian state TV is celebrating these appointments and seeing them as beneficial to Russia's interests.
Yeah, I saw that too, and I was like, hold on, what's... Like, I had to read it again.
Yeah.
It's not every day you see, you know, the U.S. making political moves, and then Russia's like, woo, do team.
Right.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder what they see that maybe we're missing.
Exactly. And that's where I think things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Jones's article suggests that Trump is inadvertently, or perhaps intentionally, creating what's called a Kakistocracy.
A what now?
A Kakistocracy.
Kakistocracy. Okay, that's a new one.
Right?
Spellcheck's going to have a field day with that one.
Yeah, it's a fascinating term. Essentially means a government by the worst, the least competent, or those least qualified to lead. And the article connects this idea to some of the more controversial choices for cabinet positions.
So, like, who are we talking about here? Give me an example.
Sure. So, for example, there's Kash Patel, who's been picked to head the FBI. And Jones points out that Patel has reportedly drawn up a list of political opponents that he wants to target.
Wow, okay, that's a little chilling.
Yeah, and for Health and Human Services, we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a prominent voice in the anti-vaccine movement. For the Department of Defense, Trump has chosen Pete Hegseth, a Fox News personality with ties to Christian nationalism. And to head national intelligence, he's nominated Tulsi Gabbard, who has a history of pro-Putin and pro-Assad statements.
Okay, I can see why people are raising eyebrows here, to put it mildly. I mean, are we really talking about just incompetence here? Or is there something a little more deliberate going on? Is there some strategy behind these seemingly unqualified choices?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Jones's article doesn't explicitly accuse Trump of, you know, a deliberate plan to weaken the U.S. But when we look at these choices, especially in light of Russia's reaction, it's hard not to at least ask that question.
Yeah, no kidding. And speaking of reactions, I mean, I went into that Reddit thread, you know, expecting the usual mix of opinions.
Right.
But man, even I was blown away by the intensity of it all. You get people calling for revolution, people claiming treason. It's like the emotional dial is cranked up to 11 over there.
I think that intensity is significant because it suggests these appointments aren't just symbolic gestures, you know. They're being seen as potentially game-changing, for better or worse.
Yeah.
And the range of reactions from jubilation to just despair, I think, reflect a really deep sense of anxiety about what these choices could mean for the country.
Yeah, there was one comment that really stuck with me. It said, keep celebrating Republicans. Turns out the most useful idiots of all were you.
Ouch.
I know, right? And then another one wrote, the Sentinels are now inside the Matrix. It's like we're in a sci-fi thriller here.
Yeah, there's a real sense of fear and distrust there, a feeling that things are spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that some see these appointments as somehow more sinister, more deliberate than just simple incompetence.
Okay, so we've got some pretty concerning cabinet picks, so we've got a lot of anxiety out there. And Russia's seemingly pretty happy about the whole situation.
I gotta be honest, this is starting to feel a little bit like a conspiracy theory movie plot to me.
I can see why you'd say that. And we do have to be careful not to get swept up in speculation. But even if we set aside the most dramatic interpretations, there's still a lot to unpack here.
Absolutely. I mean, even if this isn't some, like, master plan to, you know, dismantle America, as that Russian TV host Vladimir Solovyov put it,
Right.
The fact that Russia sees these picks as working in their favor should at least be a red flag, right?
It certainly raises questions. You know, if you think about the concept of a kakistocracy, it isn't just about incompetence. It can also involve deliberately choosing individuals who will prioritize personal gain or external interests over the good of the nation.
So how do we even begin to make sense of all of this? Like, are we just supposed to assume the worst? Not necessarily, but I think it's crucial to be aware of the potential consequences of these appointments. We need to look beyond the headlines, and really understand the deeper implications, both for the U.S. and for its relationship with other nations.
All right, so less Hollywood thriller, more informed analysis. Got it.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that? Where do we even start?
I think that's where understanding this idea of Kakistocracy becomes really crucial.
Okay, yeah, maybe more on that would be helpful. Because right now, it still feels kind of abstract, you know?
Right?
Like, how does it actually play out in the real world?
Well, imagine a government where key positions are filled with people who are either unqualified, easily manipulated, or have strong personal agendas. That might not align with the best interests of the country.
Hmm. Okay, I think I'm starting to see the picture a little bit. So it's not just about messing things up, it's about potentially steering things in a specific direction, even if that direction isn't good for, well, most people.
Exactly, and that's why this idea is so unsettling. It suggests a deliberate erosion of good governance, where institutions are weakened, expertise is devalued, and decisions are made based on personal gain or loyalty rather than on what's best for the nation.
And that's where Russia's reaction comes back into play, right? If they see these appointments as potentially weakening the U.S., it kind of adds fuel to that fire.
Precisely, it raises a question. Are these appointments simply bad choices? Or could they be part of a larger strategy, whether conscious or not, to diminish America's standing on the world stage?
Okay, so let's say for argument's sake that there is some strategy at play here. How would that actually work? How does appointing a few controversial figures actually translate into weakening a country like the U.S.?
Well, think about it this way. A government is only as strong as its institutions. If you have individuals in key positions who are actively undermining those institutions or who are simply incompetent, it creates a ripple effect. It erodes trust, both domestically and internationally. It makes it harder to address critical challenges from economic crises to national security threats.
So it's not just about the individuals themselves, it's about the potential damage they can inflict on the entire system.
Right, it's like termites in the foundation of a house. Individually, they might seem small and insignificant, but over time they can cause serious structural damage.
That's a pretty vivid analogy.
Okay.
So we've talked about the potential negative consequences, but let's play devil's advocate for a moment.
Sure.
Is it possible that there's another side to this story? Could some of these appointments actually have positive outcomes,
Yeah.
even if they seem unconventional?
It's always important to consider multiple perspectives. Some might argue that shaking things up, even in a seemingly disruptive way, can lead to positive change. Perhaps these individuals, despite their controversial backgrounds, bring fresh perspectives and innovative ideas to the table.
Yeah, I've heard some people say that Trump likes to surround himself with, disruptors, people who aren't afraid to challenge the status quo.
Right.
Is there any merit to that argument?
There might be. It's possible that some of these appointees could bring much-needed reforms to their respective departments, even if their methods are unorthodox. However, it's crucial to weigh those potential benefits against the risks.
So it's a balancing act, essentially. We have to consider both the potential upside and the potential downside of these appointments.
Exactly. And that's where informed analysis comes in. We need to look beyond the headlines and the partisan rhetoric and really dig into the qualifications, the motivations, and the potential consequences of these choices.
Okay, I get that, but let's be real for a second. Most people don't have the time or the expertise to do that kind of deep dive for every single political appointment.
You're absolutely right. It can feel overwhelming. But even if we can't become experts on every issue, we can still take steps to be more informed and engaged citizens.
Like what? What are some practical things people can do?
Well, for starters, diversify your news sources. Don't just rely on one outlet or one perspective. Seek out information from a variety of sources, including those you might not agree with.
Okay, that makes sense. Don't live in an echo chamber.
Exactly, and be critical of what you read and hear. Ask questions. Consider the source. Look for evidence-based reporting rather than opinion pieces masquerading as news.
So it's about being more discerning, more thoughtful about the information we consume.
Precisely, and don't be afraid to have respectful conversations with people who hold different views. You might not always agree, but you can learn a lot by listening to different perspectives.
All right, that's all good advice. But let's bring this back to the topic at hand. We've talked about Kakistocracy, Russia's reaction, and the importance of informed analysis. What does this all mean for our listeners, for everyday people who are just trying to navigate this crazy world?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. You know, we started with these cabinet picks, and now we're talking about Kakistocracy and like whether the U.S. is being deliberately weakened. It's heavy stuff.
It is, but I think, awareness is the first step towards action. The more we understand these dynamics, the better equipped we are to navigate them and to hold our leaders accountable.
So what are some practical takeaways here for our listeners? Like, let's say I'm not a political expert, but I am concerned about what we've been talking about. What can I actually do?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important to stay informed. We've talked about diversifying your news sources.
Right.
Being a critical consumer of information, that's essential.
Pay attention to how these cabinet picks actually play out in the coming months. What policies are they enacting? What actions are they taking? Don't just rely on the headlines, dig a little deeper.
Okay, stay informed, check. What else?
I think it's also important to engage in your community, talk to your friends, your family, your colleagues about these issues. Share what you're learning, encourage others to think critically about what's happening.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes it feels like politics is this, like, taboo subject that you don't talk about.
Yeah.
But we need to be talking about these things, even if it gets a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And remember, you have a voice. Contact your elected officials. Let them know your concerns. Participate in town halls or community meetings.
So it's about taking those small steps, individually and collectively, to make a difference.
Exactly. And remember, this isn't just about politics. It's about the future of our country. It's about the kind of society we want to live in.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We started with some seemingly straightforward cabinet picks, and we ended up in a conversation about Kakistocracy, Russian influence, and the importance of informed citizenship.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, I think it's a reminder that the decisions made in Washington have real-world consequences for all of us.
Yeah, it's also a reminder that we can't afford to be passive observers. We need to be engaged, informed, and active participants in shaping our future.
Well said.
So to our listeners, we leave you with this thought. If even Russia is paying close attention to these cabinet choices, shouldn't you be too?
Stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking questions.
Until next time, deep divers.